Congressman, first of all, thank you for being here. I thought the new speaker was going to run things a little differently. Are you telling me it's a little bit more of the same?
Well,
we won't say anything.
I would say that things are improving. They're moving in the right direction, and that's a positive from my perspective. I don't think you're ever going to have a perfect system. I've come to understand this a little better now that I'm there. When we talk about open rules and closed rules of debate, you could have a system that's always open rules, meaning anyone can offer an amendment on anything. And you might have a system that is completely dysfunctional. I think there is room to amend bills. Obviously, there should be room to amend bills, every bill. But if you have a completely open-ended system, it can become very political, where every amendment offered is some sort of political move. It's, here's an amendment, the Democrats put on, where if you vote no, you must dislike children. And they can do this day after day after day after day, and it can go on forever. The process would completely break down. So there has to be some end to it. So I understand that there's a balance that they're trying to strike, and I really do respect our leadership. I think it's important to not be dismissive of people just because they don't agree with you 100%. In the State House, we have a new speaker, Jace Bolger, who I'm very proud to have supported. And he wasn't with me on everything, but the important part was he was willing, before he was speaker, he was one of my friends and our speaker from before, they were willing to include me in the process. They were willing to hear my thoughts on things, and I became a very influential member of the caucus at the state level, and I think I have that opportunity here in the Republican Conference in Congress because we developed good relationships, we were able to work with each other, I was able to make my points in caucus or in conference. So let's not completely dismiss people just because they don't do everything the way we want. Yeah, it's not going to be a perfect system, but what I'm most interested in leadership is leadership that will take into account the various viewpoints, including the viewpoint I represent of constitutional government, limited government, free markets.
Congressman, you said you're from Grand Rapids, Michigan?
Yes.
Are you telling me that you, a libertarian, represent the congressional district of former President Gerald R. Ford?
That's right.
I would love to see you make that same advancement going from Congress to the White House.
Well, thank you. I'm too young still. I do believe in the Constitution, and I'm only 30, so I'm actually not old enough to run for president.
Maybe you can make good inflation now by hitting the Fed.
Yes.
Congressman, you mentioned the lobbyist activity at the state level. In your short time here, what's your experience with lobbyists in Washington?
Well, one thing I can say is there's probably less direct interaction with lobbyists at the federal level because I have a larger staff. My time is taken up with a lot of things, so there's more situations where lobbyists are meeting with my staff rather than with me. So I'm not interacting with them as frequently as I did at the state level. But I want to make sure I'm clear. I don't object to lobbyists as a profession. Within this system, lobbyists play a vital role, frankly. They're there representing various interests in our country, and that's fine. What I object to is when elected officials are bullied by lobbyists, or are bribed by lobbyists, or without thinking go along with what some interest group in their, whether it's their district or elsewhere in the country, is pushing. You've got to have an open mind, you've got to think about things, but lobbyists do play a vital function in helping to educate members of Congress and members of the legislature about various issues. There are lobbyists who lobby on issues I support, there are lobbyists who lobby on issues I oppose. So I welcome them all in. I enjoy sitting down and talking with them, but at the end of the day, I make the decision based on the Constitution and the principles that I believe in and that I ran on. And that to me is what's important. That as long as you have a set of principles you believe in and can follow them, then lobbyists are fine and actually can be helpful. Yes?
Where does defunding Obamacare stand?
Again, I can't tell you, from my perspective, I'm not 100% sure. I think there will be an effort to defund it by Republicans, but again, that's a call that's being made above where I'm at, and that's a leadership call. But I'm very hopeful that Republicans will stick by their word and do everything they can to stop this unconstitutional piece of legislation. Yep.
I saw you on last night's CPAC. You did a great job there as well. I think definitely this is a different crowd, and one of the things I like about you is you definitely bridge the gap between the more rowdy liberty movement and mainstream Republicans. And I think Senator Paul is doing the same thing. One of the things you said last night is that you believed in kind of the idea of a conservative farm team. You came from the state legislature, and I've seen that happen to other candidates. For example, up in New Hampshire with state senators in Forsyth. And I'm wondering if you see kind of you and Rand as just the beginning, if you see other people on kind of the state and local level coming up, and if you have any insight on who might be coming up or whether or not this movement is just at its beginning.
Yeah, thanks for that question, and thanks for listening to me last night too. I think there is a farm team coming up. We have to be very careful about it, though. Don't assume that everybody who uses the words liberty and constitution are with you, because most of them are not. And so that's
Sad. Thank you for recognizing.
that's really important to know. But we can't expect our best. If we want our best candidates up there in Congress, maybe moving up to U.S. Senate or the presidency someday. You want to have people you want to start at the bottom. You can't just run for Congress out of nowhere. I mean, some people can do it successfully. Rand Paul was able to run for U.S. Senate and do it successfully, but then again, he had a father who's already in Congress. So it's very hard for an ordinary person who believes the kind of things we believe in liberty and constitutional government to just come out of nowhere and run for U.S. Senate or Congress. You have to start at the state or local level. And it's important not to forget that state and local politics are very important. I think my impression from having worked as a state representative is a lot of the worst things that government were doing were being done at the state level, not at the federal level. And there's such a focus among people in the grassroots at what's going on in Congress because it's in the news. You hear about it all the time, and they're forgetting that in their own states, all sorts of anti-liberty legislation gets passed and adopted. In Michigan, we've had all sorts of it, and that's where a lot of the big problems are. There's some sense in which, from a pure voting perspective, I'm more helpful at the state level. The reason I ran for Congress was because I felt that I could draw more attention to these ideas by being in Congress. When I was a state representative, I was one of 9 state legislators in my county. So when you're one of 9 state legislators in a county, you're not going to get a lot of attention for your ideas or for what you're talking about. You'll be drowned out by the others. When you're in Congress, you do get a lot of attention for the kind of things you're pushing. But we have to bring people up from the bottom. We have to take people who are young. It's really important that people get involved when they're young because with maybe a rare exception, and maybe some of those exceptions are here in this room, I'm not sure, it's very hard to change people's perspectives on politics or philosophy once they're into, I say, their mid or late 30s probably, maybe even their early 30s. It gets pretty ingrained. People who are in their teens and 20s, they're still learning things. They're still excited about trying to find what their views are. And you can help to direct them in the right direction, in the direction of liberty and of the Constitution when you reach them at that age. It's important to get those people brought into the system to encourage them to run for office. And I've seen some in my state who, again, it's very early, but like in my state there's a guy named Pat Somerville seems to be a pretty libertarian-oriented guy. From what I've seen, I've been following some of his posts on Facebook. He was inspired to run largely by my run, by the fact that I was in the State House. And that's something I take great pride in, that I ran for something, and then there's these young people who come in and say, hey, I want to do the same thing. And I want to post my votes on Facebook. And I want to stick to my principles. And so I'm very hopeful about all that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
For me, one of the most inspiring sights of this weekend, yesterday at CPAC and today in this audience before me, is to see how many people under 30 are involved. I really do have hope for the future. Thank you, young people, for taking hold of your future and your fate.